So much. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for giving me some of your Saturday. It's a little bit different wearing a mask to chat to you, so I might use some more gestures, but know that under the mask I'm smiling at some points. We'll see how it goes. Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm not going to speak too loud. All right, so today I'd really like to talk about how children learn, how we as parents and caregivers and educators can see, understand, and embrace the individual child. Before I start, I just want to get an idea of who's in the room. So if you have come here as a parent, could you just put your hand up, please? Okay, so most of you. Are there any educators here? Okay, great. So mostly parents. That's wonderful. I'd like to start off by asking you to please just close your eyes for a few seconds. Okay, if you will, I'd like to ask you to please think back to your childhood. Think back to your childhood and think back to one thing that you really, really enjoyed. It could be a friendship. It could be a particular interest that you had. It could be a particular environment or object that you loved. Try find something that really brought joy to your childhood. All right. I'd like you to then reflect on if that thing, whatever it may be, was linked in any way to your school. Okay, you can open your eyes. Thank you. We'll use that a bit later. All right, so I just want to introduce myself very quickly. As said previously, I'm Angela Kotze. I'm an educator in Chung in the early childhood section. I moved to Hong Kong about 10 years ago, and I spent some time as I began my career in education in a few local schools, which was a bit restless for me, to be honest. And then I found Chung. And what happened was, when I began to work at Chung as an educator, as a class teacher, all the things that I had learned to teach and all the things that I had learned to say to children in the classroom went out the window. And I really learned how children develop. I was introduced to a curriculum that focuses on values, not just on ABCs. I was introduced to a curriculum that was based on research, both scientific and evidential. I was introduced to environments that were child-directed, which was really interesting to me. And it was incredible because it looked like the children were just having a great time, but on a closer look, I could really see the complex learning taking place. And what spoke to me most about Chung was they dedicated teachers. And after some time, I realized that they were so dedicated to what they do because they understood why they were doing it. So I made my home at Chung, and I haven't left. I've been at Chung for almost 8 years. And Chung inspired me to learn a little bit more about child development. And so I went on to study my master's in psychology. And I moved out of the classroom, and I now stay at Chung and inform teacher practices and child practices. So that's a little bit about me. And I'm going to start off by giving you 2 quotes that could probably sum up my entire presentation. The first one is by Ignacio Estrada. It says, if a child can't learn the way that we teach, maybe we should teach the way that they learn. And the second quote is one of my favorite from the very special Magda Gerber. Young children are explorers and initiators. They learn in spite of what we teach. Not what we teach, but in spite of what we teach. Okay, so as we look at how a child learns, and before we get into the deep details about uniqueness and individuality, there's one very universal way that every child learns, and that is through play. Now, I know when we hear the word play, it's very simple to us. It's very enjoyable for children, but it's quite a simple word. But as educators, when we think of play and when we look a little bit deeper at a child who's playing, actually, play is incredibly complex. There's been a lot of research in the last 50 years that has come out, both evidence-based and also theoretical research, and majority of it, in fact, almost all of it, has pointed to play as the most natural way and most important way that children's brains are shaped and developed. So this is really exciting for me, because when there's evidence in research, it makes things important, and play is incredibly important. In fact, it's a universal way of learning for a child. It's experimental, it's explorative, and most importantly, it's defined by the child. So what happens is a child absorbs their environment through observation. They observe relationships, they observe language, they pick up on different pieces of information in the environment, and then they test out, they hypothesize, they make sense of all of these things through their play. That's the importance of play. They take all the things that they've seen and heard, and in order to process it, in order for their brain to be shaped by it and for them to remember it, they implement it through play. So we know that play is incredibly important, and actually a lot of ECE settings are play-based. The curriculums are very play-based. But I want to look a little bit deeper, because sometimes that's just the start. When we create an environment where children have autonomy and they can play and they can investigate and explore their own interests, that's really wonderful. But at Chung, we like to take it a step further. So as educators and obviously as parents, the more time you spend with your child, the more connection you have with your child, and the better the relationship is with your child, the more you start to understand their uniqueness, their individuality. So what's different about them, what they really, really like, how do they process information in comparison to other children. This is really important for us at Chung. In fact, it's pretty much the spine of our curriculum. When educators make connections with children and build relationship with individual children, they begin to see that children in the class learn really differently. Of course, there's that environment of play, but when we take a deeper look, we see that some children are visual learners. So they use their sense of sight to process information. They process information in all the other areas, but it's really easy for them to process information through sight. So visual aids, storybooks, a teacher's expression and gestures are really important for this child. We may see a child who is a verbal learner. So verbal instructions are really, really helpful for them. We may see children who process auditory information really easily. We may see children who explore and learn and understand and process through touch and movement. This one is really interesting, and this one is incredibly important to have a child in a play-based environment where they can really explore their environment, feel the things. And then you find some children that really need that collaboration with their peers or their teachers. You know, they try to understand concepts through discussion and asking questions and being a part of a group unit. Some children like to take information and they like to process it on their own. They need a little bit of time to go through things. I know for myself, later on in life, I wish I had known this much earlier, but I definitely learned later in my university years that I'm a visual learner. You can talk to me for ages and I'll forget what you say, but if I write something down or make a list or summarize something, I really, really hold that information. If we can give this and help children be aware of this at a very young age, we can unlock their potential. So, We unlock a child's potential to learn and thrive and be successful when we support our children in the way that they understand and in a way that interests them. We want ECE curriculums and ECE childhood settings to not only be play-based, which is a great start. We want educators to see the individual, understand the individual, and use that. Use that to lift up the areas that children struggle with and really extend the areas that they thrive in. This is when we unlock potential. And I think as parents, of course, and as educators, we really have that power and that responsibility to see our children's uniqueness and help them in a way that they're excited about. So my question is, do early childhood curriculums facilitate this? And one step further, do you as parents seek this out when you're looking for curriculums for your child? So at Chung, the individual child is the very spine of our curriculum. It's the very core of our support. A lot of curriculums in Hong Kong, as you may know, are very play-based. We take it one step further because our curriculum is emergent. We call it the emergent curriculum because teachers take individual observations throughout the day of every single child in their class. They take those observations of child's interests, what children are doing, who children are playing with, how they're learning, how they're processing information, what they're connecting to, and they use that to inform their planning and then establish a curriculum around that. So our qualified teachers know the milestones, they know the knowledge that needs to be handed down to these children, but they're implementing it in a way that speaks to children in their language through the things that they're interested in. That's pretty exciting for me, and I think if you guys, I don't know what your answers were when you closed your eyes, but for me, when I performed that activity at home, all of the things that brought me joy as a really young child didn't have anything to do with school. And that saddened me a little bit. And I really hope that all of our children at Chung, when they're adults, they can close their eyes and they can see that all of those things that brought them joy were linked to how they learned. Okay, so what does this look like in the classroom? If you were to come and have a visit and open the doors and step into one of our classrooms, what would that actually look like? Well, the first thing that I'd like to think that you'd see is these incredibly deep and visible connections and relationships. Our teachers can't form curriculums in an emergent curriculum without knowing the individual child. So from the very beginning of the year, connection and relationship is the most important thing. They understand each child, where they're at, where they're going, what they need, and what they're good at. You'll probably see a lot of scaffolding and support for each child based on these individual observations. You'll see co-teaching partnerships. So each class has a Chinese teacher and a Western teacher. So it's not only multilingual, but children feel comfortable in the language that they speak, and they're also challenged in another language. You'll see environments that support autonomy. So our environments are set up very freely and very play-based, where children feel confident and comfortable to seek out what they would like to do, to test out their own theories, to challenge themselves. A lot of open-ended materials. This makes me excited because we don't want children to be playing with toy cars if they have an interest in toy cars. We want children to be making their own cars, how they would like to make it, utilizing their fine motor skills, their imagination to make a car that they can then play with. So we have a lot of open-ended materials and recycled materials and loose parts to do that. You'll see a lot of planning and documentation on our walls from the teachers because this planning is informed by the individual interests. And it's there for parents to see too. I want to share a little story because I think it'll help it come alive a little bit to you. When I was still a class teacher and still learning about the emergent curriculum, I had a really wonderful class with my co-teacher one year. And at the beginning of the year, as I was getting to know each child as unique children and connecting and making these individual observations, there was one little boy who I'd like to share with you. And he was an incredible learner. And after observing him, I quickly learned that there was a specific way that he processed and explored his environment. He was a kinesthetic learner. He liked to learn through touch. He felt everything. He engaged with his environment. When we were trying to incorporate maths and literacy, he really struggled to look at the alphabet or count verbally, but he learnt in other ways. If he could feel something, if he could use textures, if he could walk around an environment that was really rich and complex, he processed that information. So we use that in our planning. We use that to extend his knowledge and information base. When we were wanting to incorporate maths and literacy for him, instead of just using the alphabet, we would use sand trays that he could trace using feelings. We used shaving cream. We used alphabet letters that were magnetized in 3D or textured. When we wanted to implement mathematical concepts into his play, we didn't count verbally. We let him construct something. And we scaffolded his learning about weight and capacity and numbers as he built and as he touched different sized blocks. So this little boy is in primary school now, and I've seen him a few times, and he is thriving because not only did we understand him as a unique child and give him the autonomy to understand it himself, we were able to develop the areas that he was struggling with because we knew how he learned. And we were also able to develop the areas that he was thriving in and challenge those areas in a way that he understood. So I will end off with my favorite quote. Every child is unique, therefore their education should be also. We really believe at Chung that providing children with a play-based environment, as well as understanding each child and developing each child into holistic children, is the heart of early childhood education. Okay, I think we have about 5 to 8 minutes left, so I'd love to answer some of your questions if you have any. Otherwise, please feel free to visit our YCIS booth. Okay, any questions that I can help with? Okay, that's a really good question. So we have about 5 campuses, and each campus is really unique and really different in the way that they look. Some classrooms are much bigger than other classrooms. So in some of our campuses that have a little bit smaller classrooms, the ratio may be 1 to 10. So we'll have a Western teacher and a Chinese teacher, and we'll have normally about 20 to 22 children in that classroom. The classrooms are very open, very natural. They can freely move in between classrooms a lot of the time, and then we have outdoor spaces too. Anything else? No. Okay, thank you so much for joining me. Please feel free to come and see our booth. There's a lot of pamphlets and information that you can see over there. And yeah, thank you for joining me this Saturday.